Alright, this is my video that is about David Lewis's counterpart theory and quantified modal logic. This is something that I totally agree with. He published this in 68. Yeah. He's is big into counterpart theory, actually. What is going on here is basically in modal logic, we have these two symbols. If you'll see these here, this means it is necessary that A. This means it is possible that A. David Lewis does use these symbols a little, but his point here is to not. I guess in the '60s there was this development in a need for some operators to talk about things that must be and things that might be, and thus we had Kripke. Who else? Kripke and Clarence Irving Lewis and a couple others who kind of put this out, like who invented these operators to talk about necessity and possibility, and they had various systems for this, like S4 and 5 and stuff like that. The Kripke pairs, the Kripke sets, and I'm not sure if they're called pairs or sets. I've read the article that he published when he was like 16. He's like a genius. Yeah. Anyway, this is a different kind of modal logical system, and it's a counterpart theory. So it's mostly a theory, and there's a distinction to be looked at here, which is between intentional logic and extensional logic. Also, we have the distinction that I talked about between the ray modality and the dicto modality. The ray modality has to do with modality about things, about particulars. The dicto modality has to do with propositions. The intentional logic has to do with meaning, what certain things mean. It designates the way things are meant. And extensional logic, which is Lewis is doing extensional logic and not intentional. It's extensional logic because it's about things. This logic that I'm going to discuss here is about things. It's quantified logic, and it's predicate logic. It's about things. It represents things. Most clearly, it represents worlds and such. So we have 8 axioms, and I'm just gonna get those out before I go on his theories. What does it mean when we have Wx? This here. That means X is in a world, or X is in a possible world. When we have this I, XY, that means X is in possible world Y. This I is it's a function having to do with inness, but X is in possible world Y. AX, X is actual. CXY, X is a counterpart of Y. The C is the counterpart relation, which I will discuss. A counterpart is not something that is identical to you, so it's not really trans-world identity here, as we were talking about with Chisholm, but it's about counterparts, and it's if you want to talk about that briefly, it's resemblance. So we have the first axiom, which is this: there is for all x and for all y, if x is in possible world y, then y is a possible world, which is to mean that nothing is in anything except a world. Then we have axiom 2 for all x and all y and all z. If x is in possible world y, if x is in possible world y, and if x is in possible world z, then y is equal to x. Then which is saying that there x is not in possible worlds y and possible world z. Nothing is in two worlds. It's not possible for a thing to be in two worlds. So the conclusion here is going to be that things are world bound. Axiom 3 for all x and for all y. If x is a counterpart for y, then for a certain z, x is in possible world y, which is what Lewis translate in this. This is a book that is edited by Lou, and it's got Lewis's article in here. And that means whatever is a counterpart is in a world. If something is a counterpart of something, then it is in a world. Axiom 4 for all x and for all y. Axiom 4 for all x and for all y. If x is a counterpart of y, then for a certain z, y is in possible world z, which is translated as whatever has a counterpart is in a world. Axiom 5 for all x, all y, and all z. Possible world, or axiom 5. If x is in possible world y, and if z is in possible world y, and x is a counterpart of z, then x is equal to z, which means that nothing is a counterpart of anything else. Axiom 5 is nothing is a counterpart of anything else in its world, which is cool to think about for its theory. Nothing is a counterpart of anything else in its world. So nothing is a counterpart of. So x is not a counterpart of y if they're in the same world. Let's see here. Axiom 6 for all x and for all y. If x is in possible world y, then x is a counterpart of itself. Possible world. That's just number 6. Which means anything in a world is a counterpart of itself, which is an interesting thing, and it's interesting to think about. I'm not sure if Axiom 7 for a certain x is a world, and for all y, if y is in possible world x, if and only if a is actual. There, got that triple bar there, which means some world contains all and only as, and some world contains all and only actual things. So it's kind of somewhat reference to this world. For a certain x has the property of a, which means that there's a certain thing that is actual. So we have these axioms, which are of his counterpart modal logic. Quantified modal logic. This is quantified modal logic, which is without the use of those boxes and diamonds, which without the use of those modal operators, of those systems of Clarence Irving Lewis and Kripke. So, what you might be asked, what is the counterpart relation? What is the counterpart relation? That's interesting. see. If if x1 is in world 1, x being in world 1 is my counterpart. X2 in world 2 is a counterpart of x1. X2 is not my counterpart. The counterpart relation he talks about is not that of transitivity, which means that we have those material conditionals, premise 2 or premise 1. If A then B, then premise 2. If B then C, then you would conclude that if A then C. Do particulars have essential and contingent properties? So are properties essential or not, or non essential? So his thing is that no one thing inhabits more than one world. So there's no trans world identity. Page 126. The counterpart relation is a relation of similarity, so it's problematic in all the ways of relations of similarity are. It is the resultant of similarities and dissimilarities in a multitude of respects, weighted by the importances of various respects. The counterpart relation is not an equivalence relation, so it will not hold between those of his pairs of Kripke's pairs. With the first term, no matter how he may choose to identify things between worlds. Counterparts are is like if x1 in world 1, there is an x2 which in world 2 which has most of the same properties that x1 has, but it is a little bit different. It has a couple of property too, which is different. It's not the same thing. A counterpart is not the same thing. Let's see here. The issue is about essential properties. If there are essential properties, then there could be some kind of trans-world identity. Let's go to where he talks about essentialism. There you go. Quine has often warned us by quantifying the past modal operators, we commit ourselves to the view that an object of itself, and by whatever name or none, must be seen as having some of its traits necessarily and other contingently, despite the fact that the latter traits follow just as analytically from some ways of specifying the object as the former traits do from other ways of specifying it. The doctrine of essences as not relative to specification. So, it should be every bit as congenial as quantified modal logic itself. We do have a way of saying that an attribute is an essential attribute of an object, essential regardless of how the object happens to have been specified, and regardless of whether the attribute follows analytically in any or all specifications. Let's see here. All of these mean we got natural kinds, but these can only be natural kinds. He says that there is no trans-world identity. Modal facts are grounded as facts about actual character. Page 1.7. Kind of scrambling here. Okay, here we go. The best thing to do, I think, is to escape the problem of transworld identity by insisting that there is nothing that inhabits more than one world. There are some abstract entities, for instance, numbers or properties, that inhabit no particular world, but exist alike from the standpoint of all worlds. Just as they have no location in time and space, but exist alike from a standpoint of all time and places. Things that inhabit worlds inhabit one world each, no more. What he calls his example of Ripov is a man of our world who does not reappear elsewhere. Other worlds may have Ripovs of their own, but none of these is our Ripov. They are counterparts. What comes from transworld resemblance is not transworld identity, but a substitute for transworld identity, a counterpart relation. What our Ripov cannot do in person at other worlds, not being present there to do it, he may vicariously through his counterparts. He himself is not an honest man at any world. He is dishonest here, but he is vicariously honest through his honest counterparts. In general, something has for counterparts at a given world those things existing there that resemble it closely enough in important respects of intrinsic quality and extrinsic relations, and that resemble it no less closely than do other things there. So what about essentialism? Essence and counterpart are interdefinable. We have just defined the essence of something as an attribute it shares with all and only its counterparts. Counterpart of something is having the attribute which is its essence. A counterpart of something. So x2 being a counterpart of x1 is anything having the attribute which is its essence. So that's his view on essences. But still, even the counterpart relation is related to that idea of essence. There is no transworld identity, and things are world bound. What does it mean to be world bound? That even though x1 is a counterpart of x2, they are counterparts. It's not the case that they are the same. It's not the case that they are identical. So things that have essences as such, things that have essential properties that are essential to them are they're somewhat counterparts. But if we have, if I can find a clean piece of paper. We see this little relation here. X1 appears a counterpart of X2, and we can, extensionally, logically, we can figure that we can do that stuff through his quantified modal logic. We can look at that stuff, but if these are counterparts, then there's a couple different properties which a few different properties which make them counterparts but not identical. There are some essential properties which his has that this also has, which means it's a counterpart, which is where you get the kind of the idea of of what he calls a double life in a different article about counterparts. But if x2 is a counterpart, or if x3 is a counterpart of x2, are x1 and x3 counterparts? No, they're not. It's not a transitive relation. There's a relation of similarity and resemblance. It is not a relation of transitivity. So, furthermore, x1 or x4 is not a counterpart of x1. So, this allows for some essential properties to be there. And I think I would have to totally agree with him that there's no trans-world identity, and that individuals are world-bound. That the part of what characterizes X1 is that it's in World 1, and what characterizes X2 is it's in World 2. What characterizes X3 is that it's being World 3, and the same for X4. So that's part of what characterizes them. I can't really conceive of a individual, be it particular property, whatever you want to say about it. I can't conceive of a X1, which is where we can conceive of it as being outside of its own world. So I have to entirely agree with Lewis. And I think that the idea of a extensional quantified modal logic is a good idea and would kind of be a better way than I think maybe using those modal operators. But I like those modal operators just fine anyway. So anyway, I'll probably continue with a different article out of this book soon. And if there's anything there's anything any experts out there think I've misconstrued, tell me, because the reason the reason that I do these is to improve my grasp on things, whether it be Derrida's work or some issue in modal metaphysics, whatever. I want to improve my grasp. So if there's anybody that thinks thinks that I've misconstrued something, then tell me, please. And I don't care if you're mean or if you're whatever, as long as you're giving me something that is at least somewhat correct and that's helping me, So anyway, thanks.